Let's move into the future a little bit. Let's end the podcast with just talking about what you see as kind of, some of the things that will permanently change in your area.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that's fascinating is Bill Gates. I'm going to bring
Oh,
Bill
he's
into
going
the
to change?
he is going to change, because here's an interesting fact. Here's a man who's going to put $7 billion into manufacturing of a lot of the things we're talking with his own money. If there's any positive that's coming out of the system with this pandemic, I think is Bill Gates and a lot of other people looking at this more seriously. I'm not just saying Bill. I mean, there are a lot of other entrepreneurs who are doing a great job as well.
Yeah.
But I think part of it is, though, I think the healthcare and all the things we're talking about, this is a very major pandemic, but the other part of this is people in the know believe this may not be the last. There may be others, and we need to learn how to manage these more effectively and handle a lot of the things that we talked about earlier.
Right.
Could be handled maybe a little bit better with some pre-planning in some of these disaster areas where we have certain, we certainly have built disaster plans. I've been involved for disasters like, just almost anything really. There's so many of them out there. Never would this have come up on the schedule.
Wow.
Never would you have thought of a lot of the people who talk about running their businesses differently. I mean, these businesses are changed forever. If they do it the right way, it can make a major transformational moment for them. This is a restart.
So let me stop you here a bit and talk about. So you're saying that like Bill Gates obviously has a lot of money, so he could help out a lot more people. But are you saying that the leaders out there need to think about the community more as opposed to just being themselves?
Well, I don't know, but no, I think two things. One of the things I strikes me about our entrepreneurial system and our age system. We're ageist here. And I think there's a lot of very talented, I think Bill is just the tip of the iceberg, really, though he has a large iceberg. But part of it is that I think the whole idea is getting people that have these kinds of business skills and capabilities involved in their communities before these things happen, having them on the steering committees, one of the things I've heard a lot from my business clients is that they wish they would have had more input on what was going on in their local community. They felt pretty heard in Columbus as a governor, but they haven't had a lot of impact on their local communities, on what's going on with some of their local mayors.
The mayor system is it because they don't get involved, or is it because they don't have a platform? I'm trying to understand this.
Couple things. One is you have very entrenched politicians in this area regionally. I mean, the area, many of the people have been generational at this point when they've had how long they've been in power. So not to say that I have to talk to power, but there is certainly an opportunity for us we should have more involvement with our local communities.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just, can't be lip service anymore. I think a lot of things that we've seen with the infrastructure that have been broken over the last 8 weeks just point out to me that with all these people getting ready to retire and move into their next phase of their life, there's a tremendous amount of IQ and intellectual power in those people that could be brought in to help us really structure our future communities. And getting feedback from the business community, who's been always asked to pay for it without getting any feedback on what's going on with it, especially when you move into the next stage of your life. If you're moving in at 65 or 70 years old and moving into your retirement stage, most of these business owners that I know want to still be involved. I think we can put steering committees. I think we can put a lot of very high-powered people in the roles to help on these committees, for example, on distribution, infrastructure, some of these things that have to be discussed like adults. And because they're not politicians, we should be able to get some pretty good ideas from these people to feed up to our local political systems and structures.
I mean, do you see the change there in the local governments interacting with leaders a lot more? I mean, I was talking earlier about our partnerships. I mean, do you see that in your area?
I'd like to see that. I think that will be a challenge because most industries that are in our area are more traditionally competitive, not collaborative. I mean, the technology industry by its nature is much more collaborative.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of what it is that there's partners. I had I think in Microsoft, we had 190, 200 partners in Ohio alone. I just think the other part of this is, though, the people have to want to get involved and they have to feel like they're welcome. And that takes a little bit of skill to make that happen. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen because it has in a number of cases locally. But I think if you really want to have the impact that they could have, they're going to have to think differently about what they do. And we also have to make it something that's you'd want to do in retirement. Because I mean, that's the other part of this. The population here is skewing at 60 plus years old in business ownership. If you have that age group, not only are they trying to get ready to leave, but you've got to find them some new activities, and you also want to try to, if you can, get their capital involved. Have them spend their money and invest their money in different kinds of programs on a local level, and find some charities. I know a number of universities around here. In each area where I am, there's a major university or two or more, and they've been very effective at starting to bring that person in. We need to do that to the government too, because I don't think the government can be counted on to manage this kind of wave.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about the government and the changes post. It's been amazing to me because we get a lot of these proclamations and say, okay, now we're gonna go shelter in place from March 16th, and then slowly, oh, by the way, we need to have these things support the people who have been displaced out of their jobs, right? And then bring money in to support those people, but then post. It's kind of scary, I think, a lot of those things because, once you're laid off and you realize you worked in a non-essential business, do I now go work for Amazon? Because that's going to be around. Another pandemic comes. I mean, the psyche is really messed up now, right? When it comes to
well, even a small business person who was very autonomous and independent, having to be able to not do certain things now. Where you really could see a lot of major impactors in a hurry. And most smaller businesses don't have deep pockets when it comes to cash flow.
Yeah.
So even they talk about people typically in normal life having 30 days of savings in line to be able to survive on. I think a lot of these smaller businesses they were probably, if they had 30 to 60 days, that was probably about to tap out. And we need to really figure out what we want to support as far as infrastructure, because the other part of this is where most growth comes, and you see it where you are more than I do here, is comes in the smaller entrepreneurial business models that come out of people's minds that are willing to put themselves on the line and invest in these things. We need as a society to recommit to some of this belief of the entrepreneur is really a force for good. I mean, before this, to be candid, they were certainly taking their wax on entrepreneurs. The E word in our neighborhood that's bad is you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, here it's normal. Oh, you're
right,
not an entrepreneur?
And so you work for someone. So, but I think that's the other part of this is I think we need to recommit to some of these structures that have really provided good economic growth and flexibility in the longer term. You've got a lot of workforce right now. I think the younger workforce now are going to wonder what's going on. This is going to impact us generationally. I think this is going to be a 9/11 kind of event.
Yeah, this is big. Yeah, this is big. I the workforce is definitely going to change. I mean, think about it, right? Even let's go into education now, right? These impacted classrooms, very few teachers now teaching, right? So now they're trying to make these bigger classrooms. And now, how does that work? Okay, you need to be 6 feet away. Well, all the desks I see in most classrooms are not 6 feet away, nor do they have the space to make them 6 feet away. So do we go back to this online model or blend it? That's really fascinating if you think about that, right?
Well, the other part of it is how do we change the actions of the people? Part of what we're talking about, the one is that this is what we do. Okay, this is the logical thing we do. It makes perfect sense. We're closed. But emotionally, how do you come back to work? Do you go back into your classroom as a student and look around and think this is all could have been infected? I mean, these are really scary thoughts when you look at the fact that you're talking about psychology as well. And to be candid, we're talking about dealing with change. I mean, this is the other part is all these other pieces are just multiple layers, for a lack of a better term, of what we're dealing with. But now you start to incorporate how do people deal with change to start with.
Sure.
You're probably in an area that's much more change open than we are where we are in the Midwest. And I think the Midwest is probably going to feel a lot of the repercussions long-term financially because of a lot of the businesses that are no longer in existence or come very close to the edge and fall off.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I know retail is going to change here in this area, especially, it was always restaurant heavy because we're in a big city, people don't cook. the startup guys or, entrepreneurial guys. We have a lot of young, it's the average age is very young here as opposed to where you're at, like you said. They don't cook. They're used to just ordering on Grubhub or anyway. Um, that whole thing's now changed. I can't just walk in a restaurant and just pick up a meal and go home and eat it, right? I have to have someone deliver it, or I have to go make it myself now, right? So, this whole thing's really going to change. And is work from home going to be the normal as opposed to work from office, right? And so if I'm a company and I don't need that much office space, maybe I have an opportunity maybe to reduce my footprint of office space, that more people work outside, lower my costs. Those conversations have to start right in your head, right?
Well, and think of the other end, because we're almost in opposite ends of the timeline in many ways, more than geographically. We're, for example, a lot of people I'm talking to in Detroit, where my family is, they're having their groceries delivered now, and they would never have done that. I mean, these are people who would never and ever invest to have somebody deliver their groceries. That's part of their social experience. But now we've got people calling and making these orders, setting these up, and now we have this whole service-oriented thing where they're very under significant stress about how many people are working in these industries.
Absolutely.
So, and now you've got people who have never tried it but now have, and say, "Wow, this is really kind of good." I mean, everyone I've talked to have been so pleasantly surprised by the service quality they've gotten from people from places they thought never would happen. The delivery, the Amazon delivery man, the FedEx person to the Walmart delivery person, or you sit there and you look at all these things and you start to realize, because the other is we've got a population that's going to need these kinds of help. I mean, the autonomous car is not coming fast enough in my area.
Yeah.
So, and they may never come out here because we're at 2G. We're racing to 2G this year. So when you look at those kind of things and you realize the issue, right? So here we go to try to figure out, how do we do this? And then the other part of this is how do we assure people we're back to normal? Because there's an element here, and I wrote about this week in my blogs, a lot about the idea of fear. I've never seen so much fear, and it's prevalent. And I think the other part of this is a lot of the things that we lean on for that, our community. How are our communities going to change? When you start to think about delivering groceries and handling these kind of things, I was talking to someone today, I think she's 65, and she was the young person on the team, and she was delivering groceries to some people in some of the outlying areas. Now think about this. I mean, and this is our society. So we're going to need to figure out how do we help people with this, and how do we help the organizations who want to serve these markets. If you look at the inner city as a perfect example of that, I can say in any of the inner cities I've worked in, how do we get those inner cities supported so they have a supply chain for food?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what I have in my I was talking to Adolfo on my other podcast about delivery and how shopping's changed for me. I'm Amazon Fresh, Amazon. I have my cart pre-made ready to go, waiting for that window to open. Right now, there's no windows open in here. So for 2 days now, I've been waiting for a window to open for delivery. There's no delivery windows here in San Francisco for delivery for food, none. So you have to wait. So what I have now is on my phone, I have it pre-UA. So once I find that darn thing, I'm going to hit that button and get it ordered here. So it's going to be an interesting time once we get out of all this. And so,
hey, Greg, you should be telling Jeff Bezos that. He's watching this tonight.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, Jeff, so you've got to say to yourself,
hire more
Jeff,
people.
By the way, we've got some business for you here out in San Francisco right now, looking to take your business, Jeff.
Well, they can't hire enough people. That's the other thing is that these service workers. That's why I think this whole restaurant service worker thing is going to be changed, because a lot of these people say, I don't want to go through that again. I'm just going to go work for Amazon, but there's different problems in each area, right? There isn't a beautiful garden waiting for you in any place, right? Minds, right?
But part of it though is that comes into education too, right? I mean, part of what we're talking about, all these things changed when we start to say we no longer are tied to the buildings we live in. Work in. We now have this ability to work remotely. And I think you've seen a lot of managers I know I've talked to that are really seeing some positive growth coming from this for themselves, where they said, I would have never have thought of doing this, but now I've seen how well it works and I've seen some pretty good results from it. This is something I should be considering, and it's probably long overdue in many ways, but we never needed to do it. Now, the other question is the technology infrastructure going to be in place to do this longer term.
Well, and I know manufacturing is big in your area. I mean, automation has to be top of everyone's mind, I would think now, right?
Well, sure, because robots don't get viruses. Well, not these kind, at least.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's the other component of this, right? I mean, well, that's it. Well, that's the other thing. We didn't even talk about this. What's come out of cybersecurity with a lot of the things, how people feel in their homes and safe in their homes. I don't have that here as much as I have in some of my more affluent areas I work out of at times, where you certainly see a lot more fear of, the smart home and the smart building and those things. But we're getting there. I was on a conference this week and talking about what we can do with smart buildings. If you're a business that owns a business like the malls, you look and say, how do you manage that energy issue? Because you have a lot less volume of business going on in those areas. So your tenants are spending a lot of money for that person to come through the door, and they want to have an outstanding experience.
Right. Well, I that's going to be my problem, is figuring out how to get people back into the areas after now we've shut it down. So that's going to be interesting. Well, anyway, I think it's probably, we've been going on a little bit here. I mean, any last thoughts you want to share with the audience before we close this off?
Yeah, I think what we want to talk a little bit about is what we're going to start talking about going forward. I think this is the part of the purpose of this, is to really give you a chance to get to know the two of us, so you can start to get more comfortable that we have different views and some of those things. But part of this is about, setting this reset up, and how do we start talking about this with people and helping them to think about what they may need to do and different aspects of what they do in their business and their life and how they converge. And that's what I see us doing longer term. But what do you see, Greg?
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. I think the what attracted me to doing this podcast with you is really, you had this concept of serving leadership, right? Which, I really is fascinated by it because of, my spiritual beliefs and everything else. And I think that what we were saying earlier about entrepreneurs and business people thinking more about their community, I think this is really this episode we're in right now is forcing that. So I think to kind of talk about that more as we'll be experiencing this shift is going to be interesting. And I think that's what I like to see us discuss in this podcast, is to really talk about these shifts and this, this way of maybe thinking differently about, common issues that are around us that affect the community and the world. So it's good.
Well, I think, as we close, I'd like to have people start thinking about the partnership possibilities, right? And I think that may be where we start as a foundation, is how do we put that foundation in place by putting partnerships and talking about how these things work? Because you guys are doing a lot of great things out in California. I've done a lot of things over the years with a number of my key partners. And I think we could share some of that. And I think people would find comfort in that, knowing there's more out there than just the typical way we've done business in the past. We need to get people to start thinking there's a better way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, that's where I see serving leadership. I see it as being more of a way of doing business and living your life and creating value in the community. I mean, I really think we can't talk about that enough. But to do that, you have to have foundations. We need to be able to provide structure. We need to be able to provide these ideas. How do you position yourself when you're trying to talk to the Amazon or to somebody else about what they could be doing in their local communities in the inner city? These are the kind of conversations we should be talking about, helping people to communicate these visions to people. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with our listeners here.
Absolutely. So anyway, well, it was nice talking to you about this topic. I think there's going to be many, many more podcasts to talk about post COVID-19 pandemic issues that are starting to change the face of the world. So anyway, I appreciate you doing the podcast with me. And my name is Greg Viloria, aka Social Greg on Twitter, if you need to get a hold of me. And how do they get a hold of you, Tripp?
There are a couple places you can get me pretty normally. I'm on Twitter at TrippBraden.com. At Tripp Braden. The other place, if you need to find me, you can go out and look at me on LinkedIn. Just look under my name. It's a Tripp with 2 P's. There's another one down in Texas. I'm not the one in Texas. So send me notes because I respond there most quickly, because if I'm out in the field, that's where I go first. So please feel free to not let me know. The other thing is, if you have questions or anything, make sure you subscribe here and leave a note for us. We're really looking to make this something different. Go look down there and just click the magic button and sign up. We had a good show up initially with last week's program. Love to have a lot more of you on board. And I'm asking you that also, if you tell me what you want, Greg and I will go out of our way to give you what you need to be successful in this next stage of our life as we move out beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, but just don't beg. No, just kidding. Just kidding. You can beg. You can beg.
You can beg. We're consultants.
All right, Tripp. Well, thanks.
Take
Thanks
care.
for talking,
Bye-bye.
and we'll see you at the next podcast, man.
Sounds good. Thanks. Bye-bye.